We're now going to move from the Chesapeake to the Low Country, and we will move from Scotland to Germany. I think one of the things that has been appreciated for a long time is that Charleston was an incredibly cosmopolitan place with lots of different ethnic influences creating a very unique Low Country culture. But the role of Germans in early Charleston cabinet making has perhaps been very underappreciated until it became a topic of great interest by Gary Albert. Many of you know Gary as the editor of the MESDA Journal, as the forward-looking visionary who's transformed the journal from its earlier print version from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s into the new online digital journal that reaches more people across the globe than ever before and has a broader reach in disseminating scholarship than it's ever had before. Whereas in the old days, the journal could be read and appreciated and understood by approximately 1,200 subscribers who received that bound volume a couple of times a year. Now we know, because we can monitor the digital access, that the MESDA Journal is being read by thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people truly across the globe. We can track its readership and realize that it's now strongly in the South, but reaching out across the country. And the MESDA Journal even has readers from foreign countries in a way that it never had before. So we're really achieving that mission of spreading research more and better than we've ever done before. And Gary has really spearheaded that, for which he should receive tremendous credit. But for the next 30 minutes, Gary is going to take us back to Charleston, South Carolina, and explore what was called Dutchtown and the German school of early Charleston cabinet making. Gary Albert. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your help in letting me do all that. And somebody stole my script. Found it. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this too loud? Not loud enough? Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to just thank April Strader-Bullen for asking me to speak with you today. And just to give us a little more calisthenics, let's give her a round of applause for her work today and her presentation. Now, for those of you who attended the furniture seminar last year, you've heard me speak about Jacob Sass and the German school, the post-revolution German school of cabinet makers in Charleston. And you're probably thinking that the next half hour is going to be filled with numbers and an explanation of a statistical tool called hierarchical cluster analysis. I've got good news for you. I won't be talking about cluster analysis. Instead, I'm going to present the German school as a whole and then look at some of the furniture that has not been attributed to the shop of Jacob Sass and why. My lecture from last year's seminar became an article that we published in the MESDA Journal. So if you really want to know about cluster analysis and Jacob Sass, go to www.mesdajournal.org. And as Robert mentioned earlier, all of the lectures by my colleagues presented today will eventually be articles in the journal. And as always, it's free. Now, in my article, I attributed 12 pieces of furniture to the shop of Jacob Sass, a German-born cabinet maker who operated a shop in Charleston for nearly 40 years, from 1783 until about 1820. Sass was just one of 18 cabinet makers who were either born in Germany or born into German families and working in Charleston between 1780 and 1800. These 18 men would provide prolific amounts of furniture to the Charleston's residents through to the second decade of the 19th century. But by 1820, much of the furniture purchased by Charlestonians was no longer being made locally. Instead, venture shipments of bureaus, beds, chairs, and other furniture forms frequently sailed down
the coast of America's mid-Atlantic and northern cities, or from overseas, and sold in Charleston's ware rooms. The ethnic and regional characteristics of Charleston's cabinet makers and the furniture they produced also greatly evolved in the decades after the American Revolution. The furniture made by the descendants and apprentices of those German-born cabinet makers who arrived in the city in the 1760s and 1770s, such as Martin Pfenninger and Jacob Sass, became virtually indistinguishable from that of Charleston's furniture makers who emigrated from Britain and the British Isles, and those who were born and trained in the American South and North. Now, some of you may be wondering why I'm continuing to talk about this German school. After all, Tom Savage wrote a 1997 American Furniture article identifying Martin Pfenninger as the maker of the Holmes Edwards Library bookcase, and established Pfenninger as the most important early member of Charleston's German school. And I've already written about Jacob Sass. And also there's that 3-volume set of books that MESDA published on Charleston furniture by Brad Rauschenberg and John Bivens. And we can't forget Milby Burton's early work on Charleston furniture. Isn't that enough already? Well, to give you some perspective about how prolific this German school was and how much remains unattributed, here are 12 examples attributed to the shop of Martin Pfenninger from the 1770s. And here are 12 examples that I've attributed to the shop of Jacob Sass. And here are another dozen that have been loosely attributed to the apprentices of Jacob Sass, as well as other German school cabinet makers such as William Jones. That gives us 36 attributed examples of Charleston German school furniture. Anyone care to guess how many other pieces of German school furniture are out there that are unattributed? Over 50. Which means we haven't even been able to identify nearly half of the body of furniture made by this German school. Now don't worry, I'm not going to analyze all 50 today. Instead, I'm going to focus on these 4 unattributed examples of Charleston's German school furniture. But in order to do that, we need to go down King Street in Charleston and visit Dutchtown. Now, you might think Dutchtown refers to a version of Amsterdam's red light district in the middle of South Carolina's holy city. And you wouldn't be that far from the truth. Before the outbreak of the American Revolution, Charleston's officials became concerned about the levels of drinking and debauchery in the center of the city's commercial district on the waterfront. And an order was decreed that all prostitutes and their brothels be relocated several blocks inland into the predominantly German communities known as Dutchtown. Now, Charlestonians of the period considered Dutchtown to include about 10 blocks around King Street, north of Broad Street, and south of Market Street, because of the concentration of German residents and organizations in that city. Now, Dutchtown is highlighted in white here on this map, and master builder Peter Horlbeck's house, he owned almost all of this block north of Queen Street. Jacob Sass's shop and house was right across from Peter Horlbeck. And just up King Street, this is the original St. John's Church building. This is the one that stands today. And this is where the original German Friendly Society building was before they relocated to where they are today on Chalmers Street. Now, many of the other cabinet makers in Charleston of the German school had their shops in Dutchtown as well. And here you have Jacob Sass's apprentice, John Michael Phillips, Charles Diesel, William Jones, Michael Muckenfuss, and that's Salvi. So quite a few of them are right in the middle of Dutchtown. Now, Martin Pfenninger, Advertiser shop located just south of Dutchtown, here on Meeting Street. Here's St. Michael's Church and First Scots Presbyterian Church is right there. Even though his shop was just outside of Dutchtown, Pfenninger did own property right off of King Street in the middle of the community. Pfenninger made the Charleston Museum's Holmes Edwards bookcase, as well as significant examples of other furniture. His shop created furniture that exhibits what is now considered to be the hallmarks of Charleston's German School of Cabinetmaking, which brought a distinctly continental style and design to the furniture he made in South Carolina. Those continental features include sinuous swelling cornices and serpentine bases. And here you can see some antecedents from central Germany to compare those swelled cornices with the furniture being made in Charleston by the German school. Other hallmarks of Charleston's German school are contrasting panels of veneers outlined with stringing, as well as heavily interlacing strapwork, marquetry, and floral or figural inlays. Now, after the Revolution, the marquetry and strapwork and panels of veneers gave way to more neoclassical tastes. But the post-revolution German school work is differentiated from other Charleston neoclassical furniture through the copious use of stringing, patterned, highly figured cross-banding, and bellflower inlays with circular drops that often contain a black dot in their center. Martin Pfenninger brought some British details to the German school in Charleston as well, including the carved rosettes and fully three-dimensional mahogany basket and flowers seen on the Charleston Museum's Holmes Edwards bookcase. Now, Tom Savage had speculated that Pfenninger might have worked in Britain before coming to America, thus bringing a bit of English style with him. I recently found, and I was pleased to share this with Tom, that he was right. I found a marriage record of Martin Pfenninger marrying Margaret Till in 1768, just 4 years before he's first recorded in Charleston, at the parish of St. Michael's in the Field in London, which in the 1760s was the center of London's cabinet-making community. So we now know that Pfenninger was definitely bringing English styles with him to the German school in Charleston. Now, construction features that set the work of Pfenninger in the early German school apart from Charleston's other cabinet makers include the extreme thinness of the dustboards and their beveled edges that engage grooves cut into the drawer rails. So we're looking at this right here, the thin dustboards going into the drawer, and the drawer supports. Now, this paneled dustboard system also occurs on British and New York City furniture made in the 18th century, but probably represents a Northern European alternative to the full-bottom dustboards found on most other Charleston furniture. After Pfenninger's death in 1782, most of his German school followers adopted those full-bottom dustboards that are joined directly to the case sides. This difference in dustboards creates a rather simple method for separating Pfenninger's work from that of Jacob Sass and other German school shopmasters such as Charles Diesel and Henry Geskin, who operated after the Revolution and after Pfenninger's death in 1782. The German school's use of canted corners with string-inlaid panels of contrasting veneer and floral inlay continued well into the 1790s, with some adaptations for the neoclassical taste. Now, although canted corners are common in 18th century British cabinet work, the use of cants to display the elaborate marquetry and scroll or strap outline panels of contrasting veneer is an identifying feature of furniture made in central and northern Germany. So it's one of those German traits that stays with the German school after the Revolution. Also typical of Charleston's German school is the overwhelming practice of paneling the entire back of case pieces, both the upper and lower pieces. Most British and American furniture makers would panel the upper portion of a bookcase or linen press because the backs could be seen through the glass or when the solid doors were open. But usually the lower cases were either horizontal or vertical boards. This is another German school contrast characteristic that changes over time. And by the mid-1790s, the German school cases frequently feature horizontal boards of the bottom cases rather than paneling. Now, despite these seemingly quite specific characteristics of German school craftsmanship, determining exactly what came out of whose shop is troublesome. As John Bivens candidly wrote in The Furniture of Charleston, the retention of standing patterns from an earlier shop or shops, as well as the movement of artisans from one shop to another within the German contingent, provide a very considerable challenge to the business of separating the work of the post-revolutionary German school shops. And if you want to see how I accepted that challenge, you can go to my article and read about hierarchical cluster analysis. I'm going to attempt to do it another way today. Now, with John's warning in mind, let's look at these 4 examples of unattributed German school furniture. They span in date from 1785 to 1800, and collectively show how the German School of Charleston cabinet makers adapted to new styles and were influenced by American furniture from other regions. This first example is a desk and bookcase that is considered one of the earliest neoclassical Charleston pieces known to survive. It is clearly linked to the German school work of the 1770s through its abundant use of contrasting panels of veneers and outlined with stringing around the drawer fronts and bookcase doors. The pediment has much the same geometry of Pfenninger's work, and the carved rosettes echo those found on the Holmes Edwards Library bookcase and other pre-revolutionary German school work. But in fact, it has relatively few details that indicate it was made after the Revolution, except that the crown molding terminates in S-scrolls at each front corner. I'm talking about those little S-scrolls right there. This is a decidedly neoclassical detail not found on any other German school pediments. And the desk and bookcase shares some other characteristics I've used to identify. It does share characteristics I've identified as part of the Jacob Sass shop, including the 3/4 depth dustboards and graduated drawers. But the construction of this pediment, cornice, and frieze does not match that found in Sass's shop. Nor does the plan of the desk interior. Jacob Sass almost invariably included scalloped pigeonhole valances and a long drawer above 2 narrower drawers, or below or above, that goes back and forth. None of the Jacob Sass desk interiors included a stack of drawers as seen on this unattributed desk and bookcase. That said, the desk interior is virtually identical with 2 desk and bookcases attributed to Martin Pfenninger's shop, but with different positioning of its tall pigeonholes. This arrangement of desk interiors have no known parallels outside of the German group in Charleston. Outside of the German school group, sorry, I had that flipped. The design for this desk interior, without a prospect and document drawers, was published in 1788 on plate 8 of the cabinet maker's London Book of Prices, at least 10 years after the Pfenninger shop desk and bookcases were made. This reflects a very strong transference of London's style to Charleston before and just after the American Revolution that was incorporated into the continental style of the German school work. This general desk interior is also found on a circa 1805 secretary wardrobe attributed to John Gross, or the partnership of John Gross and Thomas Lee. Gross is documented as an apprentice of Jacob Sass, who, as we've seen, is not known to have incorporated this desk interior plan into his furniture. But the Gothic drops on the Gross and Lee secretary bookcase are also, secretary linen press, are also illustrated in the London Book of Prices. So it could be that their use of the desk interior was not a 30-year retention of the German school, but instead a slavish copying of a printed source, design source. All of this evidence leads me to believe that the person responsible for this early neoclassical desk and bookcase worked in Martin Pfenninger's shop before the Revolution, and that it was not Jacob Sass. If we go back to the list of German school cabinet makers in the early to mid 1780s, when this desk and bookcase was most likely made, there are only 2 candidates. First of all, Pfenninger was dead. The Sass shop did not make it. Nicholas Seilberg and William Jones weren't documented as working in the city until later in the 1780s, and everyone else either worked as a journeyman or never had their own shop, or their shop was operated too late in the 18th century to have made this desk and bookcase. That leaves either Charles Diesel or Henry Geskin. Now, the rosettes of the Diesel or Geskin's desk and bookcase were not carved by the same hand that completed the carved rosettes on Pfenninger's work. In fact, all attempts have failed to place them within the sphere of known Charleston carvers working during the 1780s. Rosettes of these types are often called pomegranates, but exactly what type of flower they are is uncertain. Similar carved rosettes are frequently encountered on neoclassical furniture made in Massachusetts, especially from Salem, such as this example attributed to Jacob Sanderson. And this signed Jacob Sanderson desk and bookcase features a similar pierced tympanum that appears on the Charleston example, but its rosettes are definitely not as elaborately carved. Now, back in Charleston, very similar rosettes of the type of the same type and carved by the same craftsman are applied to the pediment of a library bookcase now at the South Carolina Governor's Mansion. Although of the same style as the Sanderson examples from Massachusetts, these Charleston rosettes exhibit a much more sculptural quality. Further comparison of the library bookcase, especially to the plan of the desk interior to the neoclassical desk and bookcase, was not possible. That's because when it was found, the entire lower case had been removed and the library bookcase, the entire drawers and the secretary interior had been removed. In fact, in 1977, when this library bookcase was discovered by Frank Horton, it was serving as a chicken coop on a Virginia farm. That was a fun one to put together. The drawers in the secretary interior were reconstructed based on dado evidence and the case partitions. However, the surviving fully cased upper and paneled upper and lower backs and the frieze with crossed diamond stringing and the rosettes by the same carver as those found on the desk and bookcase were in place and firmly placed this library bookcase in Charleston's post-revolution German school. A Charleston linen press in the Kaufman Americana collection shares similar intricate oval inlay decoration found on the library bookcase. Now, although the fluting, husks, and quarter fans found on the linen press could certainly have been made in Charleston, there is no documentation to support the possibility that the elliptical patterae were the work of any artisan in the city. After the death of Martin Pfenninger in 1782, no artisan advertised services of an inlay maker, and only the simpler types of inlay ornament were actually fabricated in Charleston in the 1780s and 90s. Elaborate patterae such as these seen on the library bookcase and this linen press were most likely imported from Baltimore, New York, or Massachusetts, specifically Boston, Massachusetts. The linen press is closely related to the work of Jacob Sass, but presents some differences in construction and design. Of note is the joinery of the upper case, which is only dovetailed at the corners rather than fully dovetailed at both top and bottom, as all of Jacob Sass's case furniture are. Also, the drawer rails are tending to the lower case styles instead of being half dovetailed, as is usual with Sass's joinery. The foot pattern of the press also deviates from Sass's work and instead shares similarity with early German school work done in Pfenninger's shop. The foot pattern seen on the linen press has a less abrupt vertical rise to the inner curve than found on Jacob Sass's work, seen here at the bottom left, and more closely resembles the feet of Pfenninger's library bookcase and chests of drawers seen at the bottom right. Also, the boldly coved bed molding of the linen press approximates the bed molding found on Pfenninger's library bookcase and is somewhat heavier than the coved bed of the work found in Sass's shop patterns. Again, all of this evidence leads me to believe that the person responsible for this linen press worked in Pfenninger's shop before the Revolution and that it was not Jacob Sass. Thus, Charles Diesel or Henry Geskin are the most likely candidates. Now, the final piece of Charleston German School furniture we'll consider today is a linen press that is also closely aligned to the work of Jacob Sass, but possesses enough differences to exclude it from attributing to the Sass shop. Among those differences are the blocks found on the base. The linen press's bed block system employs multiple horizontal blocks rather than the full depth and full width blocks seen on the Sass work. Now, I don't have an image of the bottom of the linen press, so this is a Pfenninger desk and bookcase, but you can see those large segmental blocks there. This is off our Jacob Sass, and it's always one piece there without segments. The geometry of the linen press's pediment also deviates from Sass's work. The sweep of the pediment from the corners to the rosettes are consistent with Jacob Sass's, but the horizontal ellipse of the tympanum openings of the linen press are flatter and more elliptical than those found on the Sass shop pediments. Also, the short height and flare of the plinth are not consistent with Sass's work. So you can see how high his plinth goes, and this really flares out and it's much shorter. Instead, this is much more reminiscent of the 1770s pediments from Pfenninger's shop. Also, an early Massachusetts influence can be found on the frieze of both this linen press and the one attributed to Jacob Sass. The cross diamond stringing and husks arranged horizontally, a composition long considered a hallmark of Salem, Massachusetts cabinet makers, became a very popular motif among Charleston's German school shops in the 1790s. And I don't know if it's, you can barely see that is represented right there. That's sort of the diamond stringing is what I'm talking about. Now, John Bivens wrote a most excellent article about the Salem influence of Charleston in the 1997 edition of American Furniture, as well as in the Furniture of Charleston. So I'll refer you to those works for any specific questions. But who could have made these 4 examples of Charleston German school furniture? Could they have all come out of the same shop? Or are there hands of more than one cabinet maker responsible? Here's what we know. Each are firmly part of Charleston's German school. Each shares traits with the Martin Pfenninger shop, suggesting a cabinet maker who worked with Pfenninger. Each has been excluded from attribution to the Jacob Sass shop, and each reflects influences from Massachusetts cabinet making trends. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to discuss hierarchical cluster analysis today, but I thought I'd mention that after doing the analysis we went through, I thought I'd go back and look at the cluster analysis to see how it dealt with these 4 pieces of furniture. Well, the algorithm placed all 4 together in the same grouping, separate from the clusters of Pfenninger and Sass. So, based on the dates of their construction from the earliest desk and bookcase, probably made sometime around 1785, to the later linen press made shortly before 1800, we can identify 2 likely cabinet candidates, Charles Diesel or Henry Geskin. There are no records of Henry Geskin working as a cabinet maker after 1794, when he was last listed as a cabinet maker in the city directories. And the linen press was probably made after 1794. Land speculation was the focus of Geskin's life until his death in 1813, and he died without a will, and no inventory of his estate has been found. Charles Diesel was listed as a cabinet maker in Charleston directories until his death in 1807. Now, I can't find any Massachusetts connections for Henry Geskin that might have influenced his shop design or construction. But here's a recent discovery. Charles Diesel's death was announced in the 21 November 1807 edition of Boston's Columbian Sentinel newspaper, as was his 17-year-old daughter's Catherine's death 7 years earlier was announced in that same Boston newspaper. Why? What was he doing? Was he doing business in Massachusetts and bringing Salem and Boston influences down to Charleston? I don't know. There's certainly more work to be done. there certainly is more work to be done to make any solid attribution to Charles Diesel for these 4 pieces. But if you ask me right now, my best guess, it was Charles Diesel. But again, that's just a guess. I'll leave these 4 examples and the other 50 or so unattributed pieces to some other intrepid researcher to work on. For now, I think I've said enough about Charleston's German School of Cabinet Making. So let me say to Jacob Sass and his colleagues, Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you, and I'll answer any questions if you have any.